Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Michael Pearce, Deputy Chief U.S. Economist at Oxford Economics. Michael, thank you so much for the conversation today.
Pleasure to be here.
Today's cover of The Economist, I think, really encapsulates the week that we're in. And I'm not sure if you saw it, but it's President Donald Trump standing on a pile of cash with a can of gasoline in his hand and a match of money. And that is related to, obviously, the tariffs that he put into place with Canada and Mexico this week. He also ratcheted up our trade war with China, slapping them with an additional 10% tariffs. What's your reaction to the tariff tit for tat that we've been seeing this week?
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, no one can claim that they didn't see this coming because, you know, we've had the threats, repeated threats on the campaign trail and over recent weeks. But I still think it's shocking that, you know, the biggest tariffs have come on to the US's closest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. And really, you know, the economic impact of that will be felt relatively soon. You know, there's a lot of fresh food and goods that cross the border. That's I think where we're going to start seeing price increases come through first. And listen, I think this is going to hurt. I don't think it's a devastating blow for the economy, particularly because the US is a relatively closed economy. You know, we're not as dependent on imports as a share of the overall economy, but it's still gonna have real consequences for people. It's going to push up inflation, and I think it's going to weigh on growth this year. You know, we thought the economy was set for a pretty good year growth-wise, and now it looks like we're set for a pretty significant slowdown.
And I know when I've talked to voters in 2023 and 2024, heading into the election, the economy was the top issue. Everyone that I talked to said, I'm feeling the prices at the grocery store increasing. I'm feeling this in the decisions I make when I'm shopping, when I'm deciding what to buy. And no one wants to hear the prices are going to go up even more when they thought that it was going to be a good year. You're saying that the impact can be felt relatively soon. I'm thinking about the everyday American. I'm thinking about the everyday consumer. How soon are they going to feel this, and what exactly are they going to feel?
Well, we saw data this morning on trade, and we saw a lot of a big surge in imports in January. And I think a big part of that is actually companies bringing in product ahead of the imposition of tariffs. So clearly, you know, businesses were preparing for this. So that will help be a buffer. You know, obviously the ultimate impact depends on how long these tariffs are in place for. If this is mostly a negotiating ploy and we see most of the tariffs lifted over the next few months, then I suspect a lot of products won't go up in price at all, and this will mostly be absorbed in profits. But if these tariffs are in here for the long haul, then we are going to see businesses adjust their pricing. And I do think we're going to see that flow through to increased consumer prices. I think where we'll see that first is in products where there's a relatively short cycle from leaving Mexico or Canada and arriving on shelves. I think that the most obvious candidate there is food, you know, perishable goods. And I think that's where we'll start to see price increases in the coming weeks, if not days.
I'm curious what this does to our relationship with businesses and our partners in Canada, in Mexico, because they both announced that they are going to retaliate in some way. Canada immediately put on retaliatory tariffs. The president of Mexico said she's going to come up with her response by this weekend. You're seeing anger in Canada. You're seeing some provinces clear the shelves in their liquor stores of American alcohol. What do you think this does to our relationships with these two countries?
Well, clearly it's done a lot of damage to the political relationships. In terms of the economics, actually, you know, my view is that the retaliation we've seen so far from Canada has been relatively limited. It's not been one for one. And obviously Mexico's delayed announcing any response until Sunday. So that does limit the harm to US exporters. But clearly there's going to be damage there for anyone that's exporting goods. And we've seen that from China as well. You know, in the first trade war, we saw a lot of immediate pain for U.S. farmers. You know, China was able to stop purchasing U.S. soybeans and shifted away from a range of other agricultural exporters. I expect we'll see the same thing this time around. We've already seen big tariffs go on beef. And so I think we'll see a lot of those, export-orientated farmers come under a lot of pressure in the coming months.
An industry that really raised concerns to the White House has been U.S. automakers. And reportedly, Ford and others raised their concerns to the White House saying, hey, this is going to affect us. This is hurting us. The White House responded and said, hey, okay, we'll put a pause for U.S. automakers on tariffs for 1 month. That's only 30 days, though. So realistically, how much does that help? And what's that impact like?
Well, I think that auto tariffs, for now it's the 30-day pause. I think they will remain indefinitely suspended, is my view, just because of how damaging they would be. The US in general doesn't have particularly deep supply chain links in most industries, relative to other countries that are a lot more open, that have a lot more examples of products crossing the border multiple times. The US tends to be relatively insular in its trade, but one difference is the auto sector. That really is a truly integrated supply chain across all three countries. We see parts crossing the border multiple times. There's vehicles that are assembled with parts from Mexico, from China, from Canada, and then the finished assemblies in the US. So really, that adds a lot of uncertainty as to the ultimate impact of tariffs, because we can run our models, we can do this simple analysis, but some of these supply chains have been built up over decades, and they just simply can't be unwound relatively quickly. So I think the reflection there is an acknowledgement of the significant harm that tariffs would cause. And I do think the auto industry is a special case because of just how integrated it is across all three countries. This would cause significant harm for US-based production as well as those based in Mexico and Canada.
The market sent a message to the White House that they did not like these tariffs. The Dow plummeted 800 points when the tariffs went into effect. Will we see a full bounce back as long as the tariffs are in effect?
Well, I think obviously a lot of drivers of the equity market. I do think the market didn't fall quite as far as maybe I had anticipated. I think that reflects a widespread assumption that a lot of these tariffs will eventually be rolled back over the coming weeks and months. So I suspect tariffs will continue to be a downward risk to the stock market over the coming months. But then offsetting that, I still think that the fundamentals of the US economy still look relatively healthy. We've got a big package of tax cuts which is working its way through Congress. A lot of those I think are going to be focused on cutting taxes for businesses. So that's an offsetting positive for stock prices further ahead.
I'm curious as to what you think is next, because President Trump, in his address to Congress on Tuesday, the day that these tariffs went into effect, essentially said, we'll feel a little disturbance, but this is necessary. He also said that on April 2nd, he's going to put in and implement a reciprocal tax and tariff. What do you think about that, and what are you looking out for next?
Yeah, so I think April 2nd is clearly a very important day. Not only do we have this threatened reciprocal tariff tax, which I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about exactly what that looks like. All manner of things have been thrown in there. Could cover a wide range of countries, could cover a wide range of issues. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. But we've also got these other trade investigations that kicked off on day one of the presidency that are due to report by then. And that would unlock these larger sectoral tariffs on different sectors. So in particular, we've had threats of auto tariffs, tariffs on the pharmaceutical sector. So really, it would just put a lot more cards on the table of potential tariff threats to come. Now, I don't think they'll be all ready to go into place on April 2nd, and we've heard that from the president himself that some may go in on April 2nd, some may be delayed later in the year, but certainly it's increases the scope and range of tariff threats are on the table.
As you said at the beginning of this conversation, we knew that this was going to happen because he put the 30-day pause on this, so we had a month to prepare. But both Canada and as well as Mexico and even China said this is unjustified. Every economist I've talked to, Republicans and Democrats alike, have said this is going to put a tax on the consumer. Americans will feel this pretty imminently. So when you're looking at all of this, what does this indicate to you about President Trump's trade policy, his tariff policy, and overall his financial plan this year?
Well, certainly I think there were some that were claiming this is purely a negotiating tool. I still think that that's part of the deal here. But clearly, tariffs are here for the longer run. That was a lesson from the first trade war, is that we saw, sometimes going harder on tariffs, sometimes winding them back. But we did still see an increase in the overall tariff rate that ended up sticking throughout the Biden presidency. And I suspect we'll see the same effect this time. So, I expect to see the average tariff rate for the US more than doubling over the term of this presidency, and I think that will remain in place, and that does raise revenues, and that will help offset the cost of the package of tax cuts that's coming through. So I suspect there's a range of motivations at play here. I think first, negotiating tool. Second, raising revenue to pay for some of the other priorities that his administration has. But I think third is also just this belief that tariffs are helpful and do help to bring business back to the US. But the lessons from the first trade war suggest that it's not a particularly effective tool at doing that.
And do you think there are any winners sitting here when you involve yourselves in trade wars with various countries all at once? Who's winning right now?
So I think the lesson of trade wars is that the macroeconomic effects on net tend to be relatively small and tend to be negative. But within that, there are large winners and there are large losers. So, clearly anyone very dependent on imports is a big loser here. But if you're competing with some of these imports, if you're in a protected sector, this is very good for your business, because you're able to increase your prices without losing customers, because you're facing reduced competition. So in protected sectors, you do see these positive effects. Steel and aluminium, where we're seeing the increased tariffs on a particular sector, they're clear winners from this. Now, whether that means that they're going to turn around and invest large sums in boosting production in the US, I think that's far from settled. Particularly in the case where you've got these industries where to build a new refinery or a new smelting plant takes billions of dollars of capital investment and takes place over a number of years. And this is a policy which even within the Trump administration, businesses can't be certain these tariffs are going to remain in place. So I do think that uncertainty aspect kind of cuts against some of the impact of these tariffs, because I don't think businesses are going to be willing to make large upfront investments on the assumption that these tariffs will remain in place, particularly when in 4 years' time we could see a very different approach from a new presidency.
I think some 2 dates that we're looking out for is this weekend when Mexico announces how they're officially going to respond. We're also looking at April 2nd when President Trump puts those reciprocal tariffs into effect. But aside from that, historically, how do trade wars end and how long do they drag out, or is it a case-by-case basis?
Well, I think the lesson of trade protection is that once something's in place, it's difficult to remove it. And I think this is often because the sectors you're protecting are relatively small, economically speaking, but the effects are very large for those particular sectors, whereas the benefits are more diffuse. So it's difficult, once firms have got used to tariffs being in place, to remove them. And I think also, from a negotiating standpoint, it's difficult to, as Donald Trump likes to say, this is negotiating leverage. And I think, that you saw that reflected in the Biden administration's approach. They did not roll back these tariffs on China. So they did clearly think that they had some negotiating value. And so I think, the lesson is that once these measures go into place, it's actually quite difficult to roll them back if they've been in place for quite a while. So I do think this just ratchets up the degree of trade protection and will make the US economy less open to trade for a number of years to come.
And to your point, because this is difficult to roll back, some have touted this as the art of the deal. President Trump is a tough negotiator, and you're seeing that on display. Do you think this is a case of the art of the deal, or does that remain to be seen?
Well, I think clearly, a lot of countries, the optimal response for them is to try and offer concessions in return. And we have seen that, in terms of Canada, in terms of Mexico, changing their border policies in sometimes symbolic ways, but some, other actions appear more meaningful. So it does seem like, you can strong arm, use the power of the US consumer to kind of strong arm other countries into your policy priorities. So there is an aspect of that. But I think the longer term incentives are that, this just breaks away that power of US trade, because the US will become more insular, so that power will fade over time. And I think also you have this broader sense that you're not getting the full benefits of these tariffs of businesses bringing production back to the US. just because of the sheer uncertainty of the policy approach. This doesn't seem to be particularly clearly thought through, planned out. It's very difficult right now for businesses to plan around tariffs. So I don't think anyone's going to be making long-term investment decisions on the basis of these actions. And that really does kind of undercut, I think, what is one of the key intended benefits of these tariffs, which is to boost investment in domestic production and increase domestic jobs.
There's certainly a lot that remains to be seen in this tariff conversation. And as more developments come to light, I hope you can come back on and join me and break them down. Michael Pearce, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.